All right, so a few things. I want to start with Adidas. Start with their PE. Do your numbers look like this? For Adidas? And I'm guessing the answer would be no. Do you know why my numbers are different? What's different about my numbers than what you probably used? Yeah.
Is it currency?
Is it crazy?
No currency.
Oh, currency. No, it's not currency. It's not crazy. Maybe a little crazy, but it's not currency. I used the third forward year. I didn't use the second forward year. Right? Why might I want to consider not using the second forward year with Adidas? Let's go back to Adidas and look at their EEO. Why would I use the third year, which is FY26, not FY, oh, that's Nike, not FY25? See that PE of 40? And then the PE is 23? That's a big drop. Why is the PE 0 in 2023? They don't have one. 40 and then 23. What's going on? Why don't they have a PE in 2023? Yeah. They have no earnings. So if you have negative earnings, they're losing pre-tax income of 5 billion euros. There's no earnings. There's no PE. What happens in 2024? They start to turn a profit, right? Their earnings go to pre-tax $1 billion and after-tax $805 million. And then they start to make decent money again in 2025. So the problem is, if we're doing a perpetuity, yes, I said the forward year or two is more normalized, but what happens when you're dealing with a company that's in a turnaround mode and the second forward year is a stepping stone to their turnaround? It becomes harder to explain their data. And so the problem with Adidas is if you did the second forward year, to get to that 40 PE, you're going to have to start putting in some extreme growths to explain a 40 PE. And when you walk that through to your actual explanation, it's going to be hard to explain that Adidas is growing that fast every year into perpetuity, given what's actually the size and what's happening with the company. So that's the problem. The problem with Adidas is Kanye. Kanye completely screwed that company, right? And they're losing billions and billions of euros, real dollars and reputational damage. They're crawling out of that hole, right? They're going to get out of that hole because Adidas is a good company, but it's going to take them a couple years to recover. So that's the problem. While they're recovering, if we use one of those recovery years as the perpetuity year, this into perpetuity as the starting point, it's going to make our analysis a little bit more wonky. And so we have to be sensitive to that. So that's why you also have to be sensitive to where you are in the company's life cycle. And year two is just not a representative year for the company. So I think it would be better to use like year three as more representative starting point than year two. So again, if we're just being mathematical and dogmatic and we're just trying to plug and chug, put the year two in, you're going to come up with some crazy numbers and you're going to have a hard time explaining it. Continuing on, when you do your multiples, even when you do a year three, and I'm going to go to EV to EBIT as an example, their EV to EBIT of around 18, and these are now year three multiples for all three companies, because I'm going to be consistent if I'm doing a year three analysis with a year three analysis for Nike and a year three analysis for Lululemon. So I'm bringing them all to forward year three. I'm not going to do a forward year three against a forward year two multiple. That's an apple and an orange. So I'm going to be consistent in my time horizon, kind of like an NPV. You add cash flows at the same time period at an NPV for a reason. I don't want to add cash flows at different time periods. So if I'm going to change the multiple for Adidas to year three, then I got to change the multiple for Nike and Lululemon to be truly comparable to that. So those are the 3-year numbers. I'm telling you, if you completed this, even on year two, Lulu and Nike are going to make sense. they're pretty standard. But Adidas is still going to be problematic, because here's problem number two. Even when I use year three, what I did for the expected ROIC is we just had team presentations on Monday. And one of the teams did each one of these companies as part of their team presentations. And they did as-is analysis. And they did a complete DCF on all these companies with an as-is. So I actually think that the as-is is probably the best representation of the perpetuity ROICs. So those were the as-is perpetuity ROICs that were presented on Monday for all the companies. And what I'm telling you is if Adidas has a perpetuity ROIC of 14% against a cost of capital of 12%, to get to an 18 multiple from a 6 multiple, you're going to have an extreme G. Okay? It's going to be a very extreme G. Because when you don't have much of a spread, you need to really crank up the growth in order to get a very high multiple. Right? So what I'm telling you is even if I put in 12% a year for G or 11% a year for G, I'm going to need like 11.5%, somewhere in their range, 11.6. Did use the solver. I was trying to do this easily. 11.55, somewhere in there. So I'm going to need to have a pretty extreme G for Adidas. And going back to, do I really think that Adidas is going to grow at 11% a year into perpetuity? And the answer is no. I think that when I start to explain this, they're more of a mature company. And the reason why they have to have a high G is they're still digging themselves out of a hole. And I'm going to represent a high G for them to dig themselves out of a hole. But even year three may not be the true representation of Adidas long term. So I now have to adjust the spread. So Adidas is another example of adjusting a spread, right? However, the reason I chose Adidas is there's another way to adjust the spread. There's three parts of key value drivers. One is the growth, two is the ROIC, three is the WACC. And to this point, I've always said leave the WACC alone. With Adidas, I'm going to consider that a potential exception to get the higher multiple by not raising the ROIC, but by lowering the WACC. What's Adidas WACC right now? 12.3%. Yes, I can crank up the growth to 11.5% with a 12.3% WACC and that low spread to get my multiple. But if Adidas WACC long term was closer to Nike's, whatever that number is, the point is 9.5 probably. I don't need as high a G in order to get to the multiple. So I'm adjusting the spread. But the point is, I still think Adidas is going to have trouble post-Kanye with their returns. But I do think that their WACC right now is a little outsized compared to where they were historically. And I can make an argument that the market longer term is penalizing them way too much for the risk, right? And so that would be my argument with Adidas. So I would adjust the spread, but I would adjust the spread by adjusting the WACC. That's the one that's probably the least likely to be done in most of these analysis. But I told you, when we did the DCF, as long as you can explain it, you can ultimately adjust any ratio. And I'm just telling you, I actually personally believe, when I listened to the team that presented Adidas, they made a pretty compelling case for all the struggles they got to work through. So I do think that the market is penalizing them for those struggles. But I also think the market might today be over-penalizing them for reasons beyond their control, because all these WACCs are really, really high for these companies, right? And as I said, interest rates are starting to go down. And so if the interest rates start to go down, then that's actually going to help the multiples just in and of itself, all right, for all these companies. And Germany is not an unstable country. So I'm just saying, that high WACC in Germany says that right now this is more to do with the Ukraine war than anything else. And longer term, I think Adidas is not going to be as penalized by that WACC. So I can make a case that their longer term WACC is not 11 something, it's a little bit lower. And get to the multiple that way rather than raise the ROIC. I can also make an argument number two to raise the ROIC and leave that WACC. But the point is, that would be the adjustment we also have to make for Adidas if we're doing this analysis. Now, for the homework 11 that you're doing, and if you did this in class, if you have any questions about it, ask now. But for the homework 11 that you're doing, you're not going to have all these problems, right? The only problem you're probably going to have to deal with is PVH, and it's not extreme, right? But nonetheless, you got to deal with PVH, right? That's why I put PVH in there as a company to do. I'm going to give you an assignment, which is your homework 12, which is probably going to be a little bit more complex, where you have to start thinking about these things as well. That's why I want to go through some exceptions in class today. But remember, today was about exceptions, and what we're doing is very advanced, right? Other people don't teach multiples nearly as advanced as what we're trying to do. This is a much more nuanced approach to multiple analysis, which is tying it into our DCFs, okay? Other people teach it much more simplistically, right? So I'm just saying, if you're like, well, this is as easy as I thought it was going to be, and it's not as, pretty much a process that's as easy to follow, you're right, right? Because what we're really trying to do is explain what we see in the real world. And sometimes these academic formulas of the real world get a little wonky as well. But nonetheless, we're going to still try and do it. All right, questions, comments, concerns, crippling fears about anything? Somebody asked me a minute ago if I was taking attendance. Today I am not, only because we got people from multiple sections here, and I can't penalize the earlier sections for not coming to this class. So this has been recorded for whatever help that might give you, right? Finish homework 11 by Monday. Tomorrow, look for homework 12. I'll put the screenshots up for homework 12 tomorrow. You have until a week from Monday to finish homework 12. So that way, if you can get it done before the holidays, enjoy your turkey time. No class on Monday. Okay? Have a good day.